Now, typical protest usually involves the chanting of slogans and rousing speeches, but one man has decided to take on the establishment using a very different approach. Neil Goodwin has been protesting outside the Houses of Parliament at number 10 Downing Street. He doesn't say a word. He's a silent protester. You may be thinking that this approach sounds at best harmless and at worst ineffectual, but Neil's silent protests have actually landed him in trouble with the law. Only a few weeks ago he was in court after he was arrested for demonstrating silently outside Downing Street dressed as Charlie Chaplin. He's sitting opposite me now, dressed as Charlie Chaplin, and the webcam is working if you want to make sure that what I've just said is true. He was on that occasion protesting against a recent law which stops spontaneous demonstrations within 1 square kilometre of the Palace of Westminster, and we have persuaded Neil to break his silence, so we're very grateful to you for speaking. I know you don't speak very often because it's important to you not to speak, but you can tell us what's going on. Charlie Chaplin, first of all, why?
Because he's anti-authoritarian, and he lives in South London, where I used to live, in Kennington, which is just on the fringe of the exclusion zone, and I kind of thought, if Chaplin was around and there was this exclusion zone, wouldn't he just blunder into it and cause havoc with the police and the law? And that's pretty much what I did.
So you've got the bowler hat, your face is all whited up, you've got the toothbrush moustache and the bow tie and the white dinner shirt and waistcoat. You look exactly like Chaplin, and you look the same way when you went outside Downing Street.
Yeah, I was Chaplined up. Tourists absolutely loved me. I stood there with a placard that said "Not Allowed," having my photograph taken left, right and centre. The police were loving it and laughing at me, although one of them did mention something about terrorism and that I risked being arrested. And I looked around and thought, well, hold on a minute, there's about 50 people laughing and enjoying the spectacle. What kind of terrorism could solicit this sort of response? So
well, you mentioned the exclusion zone. This has been put in place as a result of the 2005 Serious and Organised Crime and Police Act, which makes a designated area, as it's described, of 1 square kilometre around Parliament. So once you go in that, if you are regarded as demonstrating against anything, you can be arrested. Is that right?
That's right. You have to give the police 7 days' notice, which basically means that spontaneity's out. If tonight you decided that you suddenly wanted to dress up as Charlie Chaplin and rush up to Parliament and protest about whatever, you couldn't actually do that. You'd be arrested or threatened with arrest.
And how did the police ascertain that you were not just having fun with tourists, you were actually demonstrating?
Well, I went up quite a few times, and They couldn't really work out whether or not I was a protest. They said, is this a protest? And I kind of thought, well, you tell me. And
you were silent anyway.
I was completely silent. I had to do everything through mime, so it was quite difficult. I had to chain my placard to my wrist because the police kept confiscating it.
What did it say?
The right to remain silent. Because I like the idea of basically being arrested for protesting the right to remain silent, and then the policeman saying, you are under arrest, you have the right to remain silent, blah, blah, blah. So I was kind of playing around with the whole idea of silence. And
because if you're standing there in a Charlie Chaplin outfit and you've got a placard that says the right to remain silent, you're right, a police officer looking at that would not be sure whether he was looking at a protest or not.
That's right, yeah.
And you weren't going to help him decide.
I wasn't going to help him decide, but we're kind of bordering in the realms of the police state, where a policeman has to make arbitrary decisions about what is or isn't a protest. It's like making almost political decisions on the street. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at.
And what were you protesting against?
I was protesting. Basically, I thought it was very arrogant the way that the government ignored 1 million people marching against the war in Iraq. I thought it was very arrogant that they created a new law to get rid of Brian Hoare, who'd been there for 2.5 years protesting against the war in Iraq. And I just thought, basically, sod you, I'm not going to put up with this. If I want to go to Westminster on any day of the week and make my, non-violently make my feelings felt, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to ask the state, an agent of the state, permission to protest against the state. I'm sorry.
Were you finally arrested?
I was arrested 5 times.
Did you go to court?
I did, yeah. I was silent in court.
And the result of all that was?
A conditional discharge, which was kind of funny because they said I've got to behave myself for 6 months, which is going to be quite difficult.
Have you been back?
I have, briefly.
Did you think this was a good use of public money?
I didn't know. I mean, the thing is, it's a seriously organised criminal act, and under the law, I'm a seriously organised criminal, like Al Capone. But really, the police, and the police will tell you as well, they're sick of this. They want to catch real criminals. They don't want to catch people dressed up as Charlie Chaplin, who are making a political point.
You'll know that there are other cases of people who've been arrested for doing what might seem to be quite low-key things. Somebody, Charity Sweet, her name was, mother of 3, was questioned by police outside Downing Street because she was reading a copy of The Independent. Maya Evans was found guilty in December 2005 because she read out the names of soldiers killed in Iraq at the cenotaph, but had not asked for prior permission to do so. I suppose there is an argument here that says we know what the rules are, the law has been passed, you shouldn't do it, so don't.
Well, that's just a red rag to a bull, isn't it? I mean, someone in authority telling you not to do something it's bound to get people's backs up.
Do you find it's very difficult? I know you protested against other things and you describe yourself as an art activist. Are you finding the business of protest is getting harder?
It's getting harder. I think things are moving away from